Oh my god. G'day, I hope you are doing well because after 26 hours of playing Batman and Robin for the PS1, I'm certainly not. Maybe that's not a surprise for some people. We are talking about not just a movie tie-in game, but one for a notoriously disliked movie. Despite having some clear memories of playing this as a kid, I was still very unprepared for what it was going to put me through. When I've done these videos in the past, I usually have a few different games I'm trying to pick between. One thing I look at when making my decision is how long the game takes to complete on average. This time around it was between Batman and Robin and the Scorpion King Rise of Arcadian. I picked the former mostly because How Long to Beat showed it taking an average of 20 hours to finish, and I just had to know if that was a mistake of some kind, and am now filled with regret for checking. I'll get the story out of the way first. If you haven't seen the Batman and Robin film and plan to, then go to this timestamp before I spoil some of the story for a top 5 Batman movie. There's not much to get into for the story, both because if you've seen the movie, you know what happens, and because fuck all story is actually presented to you in-game over its 3-night period. So for a person that has never seen the movie or doesn't know anything about it, playing this would likely be very strange. Here is how the game delivers the narrative. Mr. Freeze emerges from the ground in his vehicle. You're told that he's at large and need to collect clues to know where he'll strike next. You arrest him at the end of day 1. Poison Ivy is shown with Bane and you're told to apprehend her too. The end of the second day sees her eaten by her plant as per the movie, whilst Freeze emerges from the water. Gotham is frozen over for day 3. You defeat Freeze, he gives you a vial to cure Alfred's disease that you wouldn't know about without having seen the movie, and the game ends without even rolling the credits. Some extra bits of the story can be found out if you gather the right clues, like a photo that talks about Mr. Freeze before the accident that made him into a supervillain, and even the person that was experimenting with Venom before being killed by Ivy. There could very well be more story given by way of clues that I just never found. I was surprised by the lack of any character interaction. No one is around to talk to Batman, not even Alfred. I think that's a missed opportunity to relive the horror of having Lara's butler following her around, but Wayne Manor in this game is very small and devoid of anyone outside of yourself and a projected enemy to practice combat on. Cutscenes have zero dialogue, Commissioner Gordon isn't around at all, and we don't even get something small like email exchanges. Having at least a few of those could have done wonders for giving us some more characterization. Instead, there's just nothing. Robin and Batgirl are here, but only as playable characters. Okay, so what is the premise in terms of gameplay? This is a 3D open world action game with progress tied to the discovery of clues that point you to where you need to go next. Each new game, the clues you find will be randomized too, so the order of locations will change. L2 will switch you between 2 modes, investigation and combat. Investigation mode is used for interacting with objects, jumping, using gadgets and refilling your health and energy bar using limited refills. When in combat, your face buttons are used for different attacks, and each of the 3 playable characters have a couple of combos. If you're playing this, the best thing to do is just play as Batman and spam his circle attacks. It has good reach and does great damage. A good Batman combat system was still 11 years away at this point, so Batman and Robin requires a little bit of cheesing at times. There is a high and low block, but using them felt more like a detriment as opposed to just using a combo, stepping backwards, and then using the same combo when the enemy's own one finishes. You can dodge left and right, which is great for projectiles. It just isn't useful in melee combat because enemy attacks will track you. I did find it funny seeing what is essentially the early foundations of what makes up the gameplay for the Arkham series. Batman's default movement is walking, you have to toggle running. You're in an open world with extra goodies to find amongst some of the buildings around Gotham. You've got vents to move between rooms, investigations, although I use that term somewhat loosely as this and the Arkham series don't really let you do much actual investigating yourself. Boss fights that suck, you name it. To give some more detail as to what playing this game is like, let me take you through the first heist of the game. You open the back computer, which comes with about 10 seconds of waiting for entering it and the same amount of time for exiting. You look at the clues available, combine the torn poster, and see a note that 20 minutes after closing is when Freeze and his gang make their move. The closing time of the museum is 7, so we aim to get there no later than 7:20. It's incredibly simple, and later clues don't get more complicated than that, but I still want to give praise for letting me read that information and understand it. There's no chatter over comms telling me what I already know, no objective markers, and no on-screen HUD elements. I really like that. I hated my time with this game, but I won't forego any praise I do have. This is an open world game set in an entire Gotham City, so we have to take the Batmobile out, stop some thugs along the way if we want, avoid the bomb-rigged ice cream trucks and any other bad guys on the road, and arrive at the museum. Some of Freeze's men are waiting for us to smack them around. Now here's a lesson you need to learn for this game that will carry over for the rest of the locations. Sometimes you can explore a decent amount of a level. Your goal is to collect certain items before the villains get to them, so you might be thinking for some areas that a secret door needs to be found, or a wall needs to be broken, or a control panel has to be interacted with. What you're supposed to do is advance time forward to when the location is being raided, signified by the flash and bat signal at the top of the screen. Only then will the necessary doors open up and you can get around to the rest of the areas that you need to be in. The game does tell you this for the museum, but it wasn't clear to me at the time that walls which can usually be broken will just become invincible if you punch them outside of the specific raiding time for that location. Another lesson to learn is that some areas require a certain amount of enemies to be killed before you can progress. It's not always clear when that's the expectation. So continuing on, if we don't grab the item we're after, a boss will, and we have to fight them to get it back. That exact loop is then repeated ad nauseum. And that's where this game taking upwards of 20 hours comes in. You're spending, give or take, 30 minutes on each level. There's 20 of them, roughly. So that alone, assuming you're not making any mistakes, and not even counting the open world exploration and the driving to and from missions, looking at the clues and everything, having to retry boss fights or areas, that's 10 hours by itself. You have a fighting system that tends to feel like there's a delay in your inputs, hard-hitting enemies that can just block a lot of your attacks, which kind of makes the moving in and out of range a requirement, tank controls that feel slow, an automatic lock-on that does whatever it feels like, making group fights a real pain in the ass, assuming you haven't already just been stunned to death, and a terrible camera system. This combination makes fights against the regular enemies feel annoying after only a single encounter, and it only gets worse in boss fights where your health bar can be deleted in a few hits. An even better tactic than just walking in and out of range though is to hold up somewhere the enemy can't reach you and use one of the many gadgets you get access to. You don't even necessarily have to be in a place that they physically can't reach you either. Some characters have long range attacks, and in this specific case with Poison Ivy and Bane, she decides she wants to use an attack I am just out of range of, whilst leaving Bane unable to path towards me. Or maybe he can path towards me and me being on the staircase has confused the AI or something. I'm not really sure, to be honest. Also, I didn't know where to put this or how to bring it up, but here's Mr. Freeze doing cartwheels for some reason. And I wasn't joking earlier when I used the word killed instead of incapacitated or something. As we all know, Batman usually doesn't kill people, and the models exploding in this game don't really mean death because, to me, it's just a way to clear the bodies that can't be left around due to engine limitations and such. And that's all well and good, but how do we also ignore Batman having high caliber machine guns in his car with which he's able to blow up other vehicles, or just outright shoot people, civilians included? As far as I'm concerned, this rendition of Batman is even more homicidal than Batfleck. You don't even get a throwaway line like in Arkham Knight where you're told it's okay to blow up vehicles because those ones are unmanned drones. Or how that same game will have enemies hopping out of the most horrific car crashes to show that they're not actually hurt, or the fact that they get hit with an electrified shock from the Batmobile instead of letting you properly run them over. Here, if you want, you can just go on a murder spree or see cars full of people explode and it's never addressed. You could use headcanon and just convince yourself that the vehicles in this game are also unmanned drones like Arkham Knight, but that does make me wonder about the motorbikes that can be blown up. Killed enemies can sometimes drop clues, or you'll find them inside the levels you're clearing or in random rooms across the city. The game will get your attention that there's a clue in a nearby building by having an alarm system going off. And that is something you have to get used to if you play this game. Those alarms will dig into your brain and have you rattled with how loud they are and how often you have to hear them. Between that and the anxiety-inducing music, I sometimes wonder if playing this at 5 years old did any damage to my brain. I tried really hard to appreciate any aspects of this game I could, gameplay just wasn't one of them. I do want to recognise the ambition at least, and how interesting all of its ideas are on paper. An open world Gotham City, time-sensitive missions, the need to gather clues and figure out your next objective on your own, multiple playable characters with different stats, lots of gadgets. With even just slightly better execution, there's an alternative universe where Batman and Robin is the generational influence that Arkham Asylum is. For that to happen, you'd either need this to not be a movie tie-in due to the repeated villain encounters, as there's only 4 of them, Mr. Freeze, Poison Ivy, Bane, and Frosty, or the game remains a movie tie-in, but you bring back villains from previous movies. And you'd also have to go out of your way to develop a more engaging and fun combat system. Imagine this game fully realised. A fun experience with multiple playable characters, maybe even co-op, good or even just serviceable combat, a city you can freely travel in, multiple villains to encounter. Hey! I said fun! Another annoyance with the game and how it plays is to do with the collection of clues. If you don't get enough from each area you clear, you'll have to drive around and find more. There's no telling how many you need to pick up, and you don't know if the clue is even useful until you go to a back computer and look at it. Sometimes a clue might only be bits of lore or a newspaper story. I was genuinely surprised though to see that multiple back computers are spread across the city, as well as multiple Wayne Enterprise buildings, which give you shortcuts back to the Batcave to swap characters or heal yourself fully without using your refills. I usually assume I'm just going to be shafted in some capacity when I'm playing older games, so seeing some good quality of life design was nice. Still though, if I didn't play this through an emulator, where I was able to save just before each boss fight for example, I would have quit very early on. The alternative, if I had played this fully legit, would be to enter a Wayne building or back computer, spend a total of 30 to 45 seconds just entering the computer to save the game and exit the computer, drive to my destination, maybe die at some point during the level, go through 30 plus seconds of load times for the game over screen, the loading of the main menu, and then loading of the save state, drive all the way back to where I'm supposed to go and try it all again. Fuck that. And the driving isn't good, mind you. Control-wise, it's fine. You just have to deal with enemies constantly harassing you and hitboxes being super weird for footpaths, so it's easy to get stuck on nothing. During day 3, when Gotham is frozen over, it's super easy for cars to spin you out as well because you just have no grip on the road, and that is infuriating. So, back to the clues. If you've picked a few up and still don't have an exact location, you could always try driving to a few different places and just hope for the best. If there are enemies waiting for you, it tends to mean that's where the next event will be. The ultimate lazy method though is to save the game, advance time so the bat signal goes off, go to a bat computer, look for the building that's flashing on the map, reload the save, and drive to that correct one. I avoided doing that because it felt like it would ruin the experience the devs were trying to convey. I only used it once out of necessity because I made the mistake of trying to enter a door in the police headquarters that was locked, and just assumed the other identical doors were locked too. Even the act of moving through the hallways in these levels can be a pain because of the slowness of the tank controls, random pitfalls, and sometimes lack of direction that ties into some visual issues I'll talk about soon. Areas that can be cleared in a few minutes or less can take significantly longer when you're trying to find hidden walls and keypads, all the while enemies are chasing you down. The enemies in day 1 are fine to deal with, they're not really that strong. The zombies that you encounter in day 2 though, hit like a fucking truck. Standing in place to fight them all is a much worse tactic than just running past and looking for the key items to progress. Maybe if I didn't have the safety net of save states through an emulator, I'd have a different approach, but some quality of life features like saving whenever you want are just too good to go without. Graphically, I like what Probe Entertainment had going on here. As bad as the movie was, it also had really cool visuals with the neon, filthy underbelly contrasted with monolithic Greek statues built into the city and even holding some buildings up. The game doesn't get the same striking imagery because obviously it can't render a massive city all at once, but even with the limitations, we still get a dark and dirty atmosphere for this version of Gotham. Character models being more limited in polygon count does lead to some fucked up looking faces, so try to avoid looking at them when you can. The lighting can look pretty good at times too, despite the PS1 being incapable of proper real-time lighting. Different coloured lights are used in some sections to bring more variance, and Batman will have those colours projected onto his character model. It does look a little janky because it's done like an on-off switch, but I like the look it can give regardless. You can find areas that are more blue because they're colder, there's more green used in Ivy's lair because of the plant life. Environments in general do look distinct from each other, but a graphical issue that makes navigating annoying, other than the terrible camera that switches between fixed and a really annoying third person, is that some walls are supposed to be knocked down. And the difference between a wall that needs to be broken and a regular wall is mostly non-existent. A few times that I got lost, I wound up making my way along many walls, just punching all of them because I knew secret walls existed, I just wasn't sure if there was one to break in those moments, or if I had missed a control panel. Which is another thing the textures make hard to distinguish. What looks like a blurry mash of textures can sometimes house an actual panel you're meant to interact with. Even some objects like computers have zero interaction capability until you get to later sections, and actually some computers are now required to progress, so make sure you press the interact button on the ones that open a door for you. Another glaring example is where you're supposed to use a vine cutting gadget to allow some doors or walls to be destroyed. Some of those doors though are just panes of glass coloured green. I didn't have the save available to go back and get footage of this, so I'll just use somebody else's footage for this example. I actually had to look up how to progress at one point because I didn't know a green door was meant to represent it being covered in vines. As is typical with the PS1, you've also got an incredibly short rendering distance. I'll never dock points for that though, it's just the reality of the hardware the devs were working with at the time. Silent Hill wouldn't come out with a clever way of masking that drawback for another year, so it's something you just have to accept for this game. I really like the music, but only because it's literally Elliot Goldenthal's music from the movie, which I've always loved. Or most of it is, I think. Tim Follin is listed as the game's composer, and I'm not sure if there were other tracks he did that are just reminiscent of the movie score. And then you've got others that are from the movie itself, but maybe re-recorded by Tim Follin or something. I'm not sure. If anyone has details about that, I'd love to hear them. What doesn't work for the music is how and where most of it is used. Only one track is used on a loop when driving around Gotham to maintain that feeling of anxiety and never being safe. As soon as you're on foot, it changes to something more quiet and chilled out. The sad music that plays when Freeze is watching back his wedding video is used for background music as you work your way through an art house that has a diamond on display. The confrontational music used when Batman and Robin are fighting Bane, punctuated by a sensual saxophone as Ivy tries to seduce them, is used for exploring a chemical plant. It's good music, just sort of scattered around the game in areas that doesn't suit it. Other than the high intensity music, that's used to good effect. I wish I could show a bunch of it, but we're talking about a Warner Brothers product. As I'm writing this, I'm wondering if just pictures of the movie are going to be hit with copyright claims, let alone trying to show the music beyond the snippets in game I've used. So I encourage you to seek it out and listen to it yourself if you haven't heard it all before. Sound design is mostly bad because the sound effects are compressed to hell and back whilst being incredibly loud. Regular batarangs make explosion noises when hitting people and walls, and there's some strange use of sound effects like using bull noises for the inmates. If you really feel like blowing out someone's eardrums, put some headphones on them, stand right in front of a wall and throw a batarang at it, and it will just get stuck and play multiple layers of explosions at once. What did surprise me though was that sounds are directional. I could actually pinpoint the direction of a noise, and even something like the sound of steam expending from a vent or a building alarm would fade out as I drove away from it. It's not the groundbreaking sound design of the first Thief, but I still think it's pretty cool that the devs put a level of detail into the sound design even if the sounds themselves aren't really that great. So overall, this was a miserable experience, but not entirely devoid of things to praise. I had the same realization when I was playing Dog's Life and thought, you know what, there's some pretty cool aspects that are worth talking about instead of just shitting on the game completely. Batman and Robin is unfortunately the worst Batman game I've played, but that's because the only other ones I've played are the 4 Arkham games. Are there worse Batman games? Maybe, and I'd love to hear from people what they think are the worst Batman games. Is this the worst superhero game in general? I highly doubt it when Superman 64 exists. So that's it for me. I'm not sure what the next project is. Maybe I'll finally do something about that long overdue Gladiator follow-up. Either way, until the next video, have a good one.